Hello everyone, as always I am Cosmic and today we're going to be reviewing Grand Ages Medieval, which is a grand strategy game developed by Gaming Minds and published by Calypso Digital. Now Gaming Minds are the developers behind some of the patrician games and its influence can be seen throughout the game. Grand Ages Medieval is significantly different from its predecessor Grand Ages Rome, not just due to the developer change but also to the clear game design changes. The game is set in Europe during the Middle Ages, around 9th century, which is the quintessential time of swords, shields and chainmail dress. Grand strategy is something that the PC platform has always done well, with games such as Civilization and the Total War series. Civilization produces some of the most in-depth empire management, whereas games such as Total War focus on in-depth tactical combat, but the question becomes, does Grand Ages Medieval match up to the powerhouses of the genre? Now let's start with the basics. Now the basics of the game consist around expansion, whether that comes in the form of diplomatic, construction or military. Now regardless of if it's the single player campaign, sandbox mode or multiplayer, you'll start off with one town. Town makeups focus around businesses and the production of commodities that are available to that town. The more businesses in that town, the more workers required, and thus the more people that will come looking for work. I can tell you right now that economics are very important in this game, to the point of the game being a medieval economic simulator. Trading is a requirement regardless of how you wish to play. This is where the patrician influence comes in, as in order for your towns to be able to prosper, build and expand, they will need a steady import and export system. Trade routes can easily be set up and modified, allowing you to plan an automated route for goods. However, you can trade manually if you so wish. Without establishing good trade routes and having a good income from the trade, you will not be able to do anything in this game. Instead, you'll just get into crippling debt. In fact, you can get into so much debt in the game that it can often make the game unrecoverable, which is irritating to say the least. I would rather have a game over screen than trying to flog a dead horse for half an hour getting out of debt. Before you can actually trade, transit and trade routes must be established with other town leaders, which is done via the diplomacy. Now diplomacy is fairly simplistic in its design and basically consists of paying other towns for them to grant you to the trade rights. While it can come in handy to getting out of war on occasion, it's still all about sending people money so that they like you enough to do what you want. AI town leaders have little to no personality, and once good relations have been established, it's very unlikely that they will actually break down. It's also a downside to have the happy/sad meter that you can clearly see how much someone else likes you. It takes away from the point of diplomacy, and the whole thing is more of a pointless exercise in going through the motions rather than an interesting feature that must be focused on. Now those people who have played Grand Ages Rome should expect a hugely different game here. Town building is completely gone, and it has been replaced by simply queuing up production buildings or upgrades as they are automatically placed down. Towns grow visually after a certain amount of population has been reached, alongside building the respective upgrades for civic buildings. Other than the actual placement of new settlements, you can actually control very little in the towns, other than its economics. This in itself is somewhat disappointing in my opinion. Something as simple as building placement can be very satisfying in games such as these, and it's a real shame that it's missing, and it's a shame that the game forces you to be so standoffish with towns. The game does contain technology progression in a limited form, and you can use the points that you receive from gaining new ranks, such as gaining the rank of Baron, to research new production buildings, improvements to traders and new military units. However, again, There's not a great amount of depth to what there is here, and you can't really research and improve that much. Combat, like so much of the game, is to be watched from afar. Fighting battles and sieging towns consists little more of making sure you have superior numbers. Troops are affected by morale, however that morale is directly tied into your bank balance, meaning that if you're in debt, you cannot move your troops and they will stay at the nearest town, which becomes highly aggravating when you're getting attacked. Combat takes place automatically and kind of takes the pleasure out of it completely. It's a simple numbers game that if you have more, you'll win. There are no tactics or modifiers that are particularly involved that are actually noteworthy, and it just makes the whole thing exceedingly boorish. The single-player campaign is a non-linear story-driven campaign that at the end of the story opens up to a grand campaign. The story places you in the role of a young region ruler under a new empress of Constantinople. The story follows your rise to power and deals with the politics of the Senate and of the time. The story is well told through a well voice acted narrator, but it's not particularly awe-inspiring. The game also features a sandbox mode and a multiplayer mode, which is really where the longevity of the game will be found. The graphics of the game are nice, and there's nothing really that much to complain about in terms of the visuals or the sound. Sure, it's not the greatest looking game, nor is it the greatest sounding game, but it works nice to create a decent looking medieval Europe that's overall fairly bland. Zooming in to see townsfolk at work never really gets boring unless you get to the point and you do it a lot and then you realise it's the same animations over and over. For a game set in a medieval period, there are a couple of odd exclusions in the game that I think would have made for some interesting features. Religion, for example, was huge at the time, and it was at the heart of all politics around the world. It seems odd that religion is non-existent in the game in any form. The game has so much lacking in it, it feels cold and bland. The game does feature Tropico-style weather events in the form of natural disasters, which does add a little spice on occasion, but it ultimately works to become bothersome when everything else solely relies on economics. Almost every aspect and element of the game is directly tied in some way to the economic side of the game, which is why I said before it's more of a medieval economic simulator. Don't get me wrong, planning trade routes out and expanding your empire is fairly satisfying. However, if you're like me and completely uninterested in trade and economic forecasts, this game is not for you in any way. The game seriously lacks in some departments, and this results in an overall impression of a dull nothingness. Bar browse balance sheets and making sure you have more troops than the enemy, there is little else to do other than to sit back, hit spacebar to speed up the game speed. Coming back to my original question, does this match up with the likes of Total War or Civilization? No. While the economic side is okay, the lack of any depth to the game's other elements leave it lagging behind its competitors in more ways than one. And that is my review of Grand Ages Medieval. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.